There is a kind of love that never announces itself. It doesn't send flowers. It doesn't write long messages at midnight. It doesn't make speeches or grand gestures or post about you on social media. It just shows up, quietly, consistently, in ways so small you could spend years looking right past it and never realize what you were looking at. And here is what nobody tells you. The person who loves you most might also be the person who is the worst at showing it. Not because they don't feel it, but because they feel it so deeply that the feeling itself has nowhere to go. This video is about that kind of love, the love that hides, the devotion that doesn't know how to speak, and the science, the psychology, and the quiet truth behind why your soulmate might be completely, madly, irreversibly devoted to you, and have almost no idea how to let you know. Let's start somewhere unexpected. Let's start with your nervous system. When two people share a deep emotional bond, the kind that goes beyond surface-level attraction, something remarkable begins to happen in their bodies, without any conscious decision being made. Their heart rates start to synchronize. Their breathing patterns begin to mirror each other. The moment one person walks into a room, the other's nervous system responds, not emotionally, not yet, but biologically. It quiets, it steadies, it regulates. Researchers call this co-regulation, and what it means in plain language is this. If you've ever noticed that someone seems to physically calm down the moment you arrive, not because they said anything, not because you did anything, just because you were there, that is not a coincidence. That is their body telling you something their mouth has never found the words for. That is devotion at the level of the nervous system, before thought, before language, before they even understand what they're feeling. That's where it starts. Deeper than consciousness. And the way a devoted person stores information about you is unlike almost anything else in human behavior. There's a phenomenon that researchers have observed in people who are emotionally bonded to someone. The brain treats information about that person as high priority. It holds on to it the way it holds on to things it needs to survive. So someone who is deeply devoted to you will remember things you have long forgotten about yourself. A throwaway comment you made 6 months ago. A food you said you kind of liked once briefly while scrolling through a menu. The name of a teacher you mentioned in passing. The thing you said you wished you had done differently. They are not trying to remember these things. Their brain is simply doing what brains do when they've decided something matters, encoding it, filing it, keeping it. You are a priority in their nervous system, whether they've admitted that to themselves or not. There is another detail, almost invisible, and almost impossible to fake, that researchers have documented in people experiencing deep attraction and emotional investment. Their pupils dilate. Not metaphorically, literally. The pupils of the human eye expand involuntarily in response to genuine interest and emotional activation. It happens before a conscious feeling is registered. It happens before they know what they're feeling. The body signals devotion before the mind can stop it. This matters because it means that the love is real at a level that bypasses performance. You can pretend not to care with your words. You can pretend with your body language. But you cannot pretend with your pupils. And someone whose eyes change, subtly, involuntarily, when they look at you, their body has already told you the truth. There is also something extraordinary that happens with empathy when two people are truly bonded. It extends into the physical. Studies on what researchers call somatic empathy, body-based empathy, have found that people who are deeply connected to someone can experience something like phantom pain when that person is hurting. A kind of unexplained tiredness that mirrors their person's exhaustion. A discomfort in the body that seems to have no cause until they find out what the person they love is going through. It is one of the most overlooked signs of a real soulmate connection, because it doesn't feel like love. It just feels like your body doing something strange. But the strange thing your body is doing is called caring so much that the boundary between you and another person becomes porous. That is not performance. That is not strategy. That is not something you can manufacture. It either exists or it doesn't. Now here is something most people have never thought about, and it might reframe everything you've been confused about in your most important relationship. There is a pattern of behavior, consistent, documented, deeply misunderstood, that shows up in people with what psychologists call avoidant attachment, and it works like this. The person feels love intensely, not less than other people, not less than you, just as much, sometimes more. But closeness, real, deep, soul-level closeness, activates something in their nervous system that they can't control. A threat response, a warning signal that says, if you get too close, you will get hurt. And so the more devoted they feel, the more they pull back. The deeper the love, the stronger the retreat. Not because they don't care, but because they care so much that the feeling becomes overwhelming, and their old survival strategy kicks in automatically. What looks like distance is actually fear. What looks like indifference is actually someone who got close enough to feel the full weight of what they could lose, and panicked. And here is something that follows directly from that. A person who has never learned to express love in words, or who grew up in a home where expressing love made you vulnerable to having it taken away, will begin to route their devotion through actions instead. Quietly, without announcement. They'll fix the thing you mentioned once, weeks ago, without you asking. They'll learn how you take your coffee so that on the day you're running late, it's already ready. They'll show up in logistics the way other people show up in language. They'll quietly reorganize their day around you. They'll fill the gaps in your life with solutions rather than sentiment. This is not a lesser form of love. This is not a substitute for real affection. This is devotion that has found a different door. And if you've been waiting for someone to say what they feel, you may have been standing right next to someone who has been showing you, every single day, in a language you haven't yet learned to hear. There is a psychological concept called alexithymia, and it affects more people than almost anyone realizes. Roughly 10% of the population by some estimates. People with alexithymia have a genuine neurological difficulty identifying and expressing emotions. They feel things, often deeply, but there is a disconnect between the feeling and the ability to name it, describe it, or express it in ways that others recognize. For someone with alexithymia, telling you I love you might be functionally impossible, not because the love isn't there, but because the translation from internal experience to external expression is genuinely blocked. They are not emotionally unavailable in the way we usually mean it. They are emotionally untranslatable. And the difference matters, because untranslatable love is still love. It just needs a different kind of reading. Now let's talk about something that looks like anger, but isn't. If you've ever noticed that someone reacts with a slightly disproportionate intensity when another person makes a joke at your expense, or when something happens to you that shouldn't be a big deal, pay attention to that. That disproportionate response is not temper. That is a protection response activating. When someone is deeply devoted to you, you become a territory their nervous system defends. Someone says something careless about you, and suddenly they're sharper than the moment requires. Someone puts you in a situation that's slightly unfair, and they're already 5 steps ahead, problem solving. That vigilance, that automatic protective alertness around your well-being, is one of the most honest signals devotion produces. You can't fake that level of readiness. It comes from somewhere real. There is also a particular pattern in how devoted people occupy shared spaces. Watch the body, not the face. A person can control their expression. They can control what they say. But the orientation of their torso, the direction their chest is pointed, is mostly unconscious. People point their bodies toward what matters to them. So, even when someone appears to be ignoring you, looking at their phone, talking to someone else, facing the other direction, if their torso is consistently oriented toward you, their body is tracking you. Their nervous system has you marked. That is not nothing. That is the body maintaining contact. even when the mind is trying to seem like it isn't. The just-in-case behavior is something almost no one talks about, but once you know to look for it, you'll see it everywhere. Devoted people make invisible decisions for you. They order the extra portion just in case you're hungry. They keep a spare charger at their place just in case you stay. They check the weather before making plans, not for themselves, but because they already know you run cold or always forget your jacket. They don't announce these things. They don't ask for credit. They just quietly, continuously make small adjustments to the world around them to accommodate your presence. In a future they're already imagining, even if they haven't said so. That future planning is enormous. It means you are already built into their picture of what comes next. Not hypothetically, concretely enough that they're making logistical preparations for a life that includes you. And research on unconscious commitment has revealed something that will stay with you. People who are deeply bonded to someone begin to quietly remove themselves from other romantic possibilities. Not because they've made a conscious decision to commit, but because their brain has already made the allocation. Another person expresses interest, and something in them deflects it, almost automatically. The door that should be open stays closed. Not because they're following a rule, because the space has already been given to someone else, to you, before they've even admitted it to themselves. Pay attention to what happens to someone's sense of humor when they're around you versus everyone else. Shared humor requires vulnerability. To make someone laugh, you have to let down some part of your wall. You have to be readable to them, in a sense, for the joke to land. People who are deeply devoted will develop a completely different register of humor specifically with their person. Softer, more layered, more inside. If someone is noticeably more playful, more genuinely funny, more freely themselves in their humor with you than with anyone else, that is not an accident. That is what it looks like when someone's defenses come down, specifically for you. There is a moment in the science of connection that doesn't get nearly enough attention, the phenomenon of recognition, that feeling, upon meeting someone, of I've known you my whole life. For a long time, this was explained away as romantic fantasy, projection, wishful thinking. But neuroscientists studying social cognition have a different explanation. The human brain builds templates through early bonding experiences, patterns of behavior, microexpressions, the rhythm of speech, the way someone moves through the world. When someone's patterns closely match the templates already stored in your neural circuitry, the brain fires a recognition signal. Not I've met you before, but you match something deep in my architecture. That is what soulmate recognition actually is. Not mysticism, neural pattern matching. Your brain finding someone who already speaks its language. Carl Jung wrote about what he called the individuation clash. The idea that two people who are genuinely, deeply compatible will often, before anything else, trigger each other's deepest wounds. Not because they're wrong for each other, because they're close enough to reach those wounds, because the connection is powerful enough to do real work. The turbulence that often happens at the beginning of a soulmate connection, the friction, the confusion, the moments that feel like this should be easier, isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's the relationship doing the work that only a relationship that deep could reach. The chaos doesn't always mean incompatibility. Sometimes it means you found someone whose presence is strong enough to show you yourself. There is a form of devotion so quiet most people never notice it, but it is one of the truest, the way someone talks about you when you're not there. People who are deeply devoted cannot fully suppress it when speaking about their person in their absence. Something in their voice changes, a softness, a pride they didn't consciously choose to express. Ask the people in their life, ask their closest friends. You will find that your name is not unfamiliar to them, that you've been mentioned in rooms you've never entered, in conversations that had nothing to do with you, with a warmth that the person doing the talking probably didn't even notice they were showing. That is devotion that has overflowed the container they were trying to keep it in. There is a distinction worth making between two kinds of love that look nothing alike. The first kind is loud. It's limerence, that feverish, obsessive, all-consuming state of early love, where the other person is constantly in your thoughts, where the feelings are grand and performed and publicly visible. Limerence is obvious. It declares itself. The second kind is quiet. It's what researchers call companionate love. Deep, steady, often unspoken. It doesn't make speeches. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't look like what movies taught us love should look like. But it lasts. It holds. The person who has never once let you down without any fanfare is showing you something rarer than all the grand gestures in the world. Consistent, quiet devotion is not a lesser love. It is, by most measures, the realest kind. And before anyone has consciously registered what they feel, their behavior has already reorganized itself around the person they love. Sleep patterns shift. Appetite changes. Sometimes they eat more, sometimes they forget to eat, and they don't know why. They start making room, scheduling slightly differently. They find themselves making plans and leaving invisible space in them, not knowing they're doing it. This is what researchers describe as pre-conscious commitment, the way the body and the behavioral patterns begin preparing for someone before the mind has caught up. The love is already running the system before the person has named it. By the time they realize what they feel, they've already been acting on it for months. The things someone remembers about you reveal what your presence has done to them. Not the big things, not your birthday, not your favorite color, not the stories you've told more than once. The specific things, the tiny, unremarkable throwaway things, that you always read the end of a menu first, that you need a few minutes of quiet after arriving somewhere before you're ready to talk, that you hold your cup with both hands, that you laugh differently at things that catch you off guard versus things you were expecting to find funny. These are not things you asked anyone to notice. They are things someone has been noticing because you matter to them at a level that makes every detail worth keeping. The hypothetical conversation is one of the most overlooked tells. When someone says, "If we ever went somewhere together, you'd probably love this," then "if we ever" is doing tremendous work. Because it means they've already been there in their mind. They've already run the simulation. They've already been imagining a future that includes you with enough specificity that they know what you like about it. People don't do that for people they're indifferent to. People don't map their future around someone they're just passing through. One of the most underappreciated signs of a genuine soul-level connection is the quality of silence between two people. Comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't feel like something is missing, the kind that feels like rest, requires an enormous amount of trust. Most people cannot do it. They fill every quiet moment with noise because silence with someone you're not truly bonded to feels like exposure, like an accusation. But with someone who truly knows you and is truly safe to you, silence becomes one of the forms of closeness. It means the relationship is operating on a level that doesn't need performance. When you can stop doing and just be with someone, you have built something with your nervous systems that most people spend their whole lives looking for and never find. There is a form of love so selfless, it often goes completely unrecognized. The person who speaks well of you in rooms you've never entered, who recommends you for something without telling you, who defends your reputation without needing you to know they did it, who, in conversations where your name comes up, is quietly, consistently your advocate, even when there's nothing in it for them. This is devotion expressed in its purest form. It requires no reciprocity. It asks nothing. It doesn't even necessarily need to be known. It's love that acts on your behalf in the world, even when you're not watching. And finally, there is the change. The quiet, unannounced fundamental change that happens in a person when they've met someone who matters. Not the change they make to impress you, not the change they make to keep you. The change they make because being near you made them want to be better, not for you, but because of you. Because something in your presence raised a standard in them they didn't know they had. Because watching you move through the world reminded them of a version of themselves they'd been meaning to return to. You didn't ask them to change. You didn't push. You didn't even notice it happening. But something about you became the reason they started. And that, out of everything, is the quiet miracle of a soulmate connection. You don't need to demand their growth, you simply inspire it. Just by being the person you are. Just by being present in their life. Here is what it all adds up to. You may have been watching someone give you the most honest love of your life in a language you've never been taught to read. Not because they're withholding it, not because it isn't real, but because devotion doesn't always look the way we were told it would look. It doesn't always come with words or flowers or declarations. Sometimes, it comes in the orientation of someone's body toward you in a crowded room, in a spare charger left at their place, in the way their voice changes when your name comes up, in the fact that they're still there, quietly, consistently, unshakably still there, long after the people who said all the right things have gone. They don't know how to show it, but they have been showing you. Every single day, in 100 ways you're only now learning to read. You don't have to wait for them to find the words. The words are already there. You just have to know where to look.